everyone who comes here from America leaves inspired and leaves believing in Ukraine. And so if you go to the Hill newspaper, you can, at thehill.com, you can see that story. But
before we continue, we invite you to follow our channel, the only American show reporting live from Ukraine every day.
Wendy Snyder sitting in for Bob Sirott this morning and tomorrow morning as well. It's been a long time since I have spoken to Joseph Linsley. I know you guys have heard him every morning for what, the last how many days, Joseph?
Wendy, great to talk with you. It's been more than 1,000 days of this big war. And every weekday of those days, we're communicating here together in WGN, and always great to hear your voice. I'm talking to you now today from Kyiv, and we have it's in many ways it's an exhausting time, but what we see happening right now these days is so much maneuvering here in Ukraine to, as we see all around the world, to determine the shape of the next American presidential administration, and to make sure that Ukrainians are working to make sure their voices are heard. And meanwhile, we also have, so many other fires going on throughout the world. The situation in Syria, the situation in Georgia, where people continue to be protesting in the streets every day. And so it's a very intense time. And I just saw a few moments ago, the Hill newspaper out of Washington, that covers, Congress and Capitol Hill. They just published a story I wrote, a bit of a cheeky story. I'm waiting to see what kind of reaction there will be. But I proposed six different people, actually 7 different people, who I think can help bridge the informational divide between the United States, really actually between MAGA, between the world of Donald Trump and the cause of Ukraine. And so if you go to the Hill newspaper, you can at thehill.com, you can see that story. But because what I have observed in the past week, I met some leading Republicans who came to Ukraine, and when they come here, they're inspired. When they meet the people, they meet the soldiers, they meet the regular people who work every day to win, and the people who want to be free, no matter what their professions are. And everyone who comes here from America leaves inspired and leaves believing in Ukraine. But people in the U.S. Who don't support Ukraine, I think it's from what they tell me is that they simply don't know the real Ukraine. And I'll put it this way: like I talked to you all about the 12 Ukrainian soldier musicians that were traveling the U.S. for 2 months. Some of them were wounded in battle. There's an opera singer who lost his leg to a landmine. There's a girl who plays the violin who lost her eye. And they spent 2 months traveling the U.S. They even visited my parents in North Carolina.
Really?
They played a nice concert.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. They sang "Happy Birthday" to my grandmother, and so it was really a nice moment. But they traveled through the southeastern U.S. and they went to places where there's a lot of skepticism about Ukraine. And what they realized is that skepticism is not about Ukraine. It's actually a deep skepticism of Washington. Americans, when they hear Washington talk about war, they say, no thanks. We already did that for 20 years with Iraq and Afghanistan. But when they hear that Ukraine, the cause of Ukraine is something deeper than what the politicians say in Washington, then all of a sudden people begin to support Ukraine. And one of the musicians, they've now returned to Ukraine. One of them told me at the very end of their trip, they were in Sacramento, California. And a few of the musicians went into a bar after one of their shows. And they had their Ukrainian military gear, that Ukrainian flag patches and all that. And they walk into a bar, and there were 3 old guys that said, "Get out of here." They saw the Ukrainian flag and they said, "Get out of here." They didn't know these guys were Ukrainians, and they hated the idea of Ukraine. And so one of the soldier musicians, who's a very popular guy in Ukraine, like 500,000 followers on social media, he said, "Hey, can I buy you a drink and we can talk?" He said, "I'm Ukrainian. Please tell me. I want to know why you hate us." And as they began to talk, the Ukrainian learned that these Americans, they didn't actually hate Ukraine. They were just so disgusted with Washington, and they thought that Washington, every time Washington talks about Ukraine too much and not enough about problems in America. And one thing that one of these old Americans said in the bar, he said, they didn't like Joe Biden. And the Ukrainians said, "Hey, Joe Biden's not a hero in Ukraine because he's actually limited us from winning. And as soon as he said that, there was a rapport between these Americans and Ukrainians. And then the Americans said, hey, we'll buy you some drinks. And the Ukrainians said, no, I'm driving. I can't have a drink. And the Americans said, hey, we're cops. It's okay. Which is a little insight into sort of the American corruption. I think in Ukraine that would not happen, but in America that does happen. But just an interesting sort of personal window into, often these misunderstandings come to a lack of communication and conversation. And so in my story, In the Hill, I propose these 7 different people I think can help break some of these barriers. And on the Ukrainian side, there's the warrior called Gandalf. He's from the Azov regiment, which there's been a lot of negative press about. But Azov, I think if Americans knew about Azov, they would support it. And Gandalf lost his eye and hand in battle. He's famously got a hook, but he's a very eloquent guy. He spoke to the United Nations. Someone like him would be powerful. There's Sergei Stakhovsky, who defeated Roger Federer at Wimbledon when Federer was reigning champ. And Stakhovsky's now a soldier. And he speaks English perfectly, and I think his voice would be very helpful. And then on the American side, I have the Americans who I mentioned in my story. I know them, and they don't know that I put them in the story. But these are people close to Trump, and they're gonna find out today. Morgan Ortagus and Ezra Cohen and Luke Coffey, 3 American voices who are close to Trump, are respected by people in the world of Trump, but who also understand what Ukraine is about. And then the last one is a wild card, Timothy Snyder. He's a professor at Yale University. He does not like Trump at all, but he knows his history. He's probably the best historian of Eastern Europe and a historian of Ukraine, and he believes in Ukraine. And he's a clear voice about what Ukraine represents and why Ukraine can win and why Russia must be defeated. And I know he said some things that are not nice about Trump, but I think if the Trump people would listen to him, that could really help break a lot of these barriers. So if you check out The Hill, you can see my somewhat cheeky suggestions on ways we can improve communication between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Yeah, 6 people who can bridge the U.S. Ukraine divide. Joseph Linsley. It's posted on thehill.com. And, depending on what side of the political divide you're on, we just need to talk to one another. We just need to listen to one another because you know what? We are all more alike than we are different. Would you agree?
Wendy, absolutely. And that's the lesson you feel when you go through so many missile attacks and drone attacks. You stop caring about the partisan things and you say, let's be honest at the very least with each other, and honest and kind. And that's what has to be achieved. So
appreciate it. And people can check you out on your website, UkrainianFreedomNews.com.
That's right, Wendy. Yes, and you can follow my social media. All the links are there at UkrainianFreedomNews.com.
All right, cool. We will talk to you tomorrow. Joseph, great to talk to you.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?